Hello to Nerdarchy. Well, I just haven't done this in so long. I don't even know what I'm saying. Hello, welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerd Dave, and tonight I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy
Should
Ted.
we cut
How
and
are you
like
doing this
redo the
how,
opening like the old
how are you
days?
doing this fine and lovely evening, sir?
Good, good, good. I am doing good. Finally got so first of all, apologies. We've been away for a while from our usual Monday night that used to be Sunday night that was previously Monday night live chats due to various life things and also OBS updating and my brand new computer that should be able to handle whatever the update was going. Yeah, we're not doing that. There was something I had to download and I couldn't, and I eventually had to solve the problem by rolling back like several updates ago, and now we have OBS for today. So until the next update, maybe, or until I figure out what's going on with it. But with that being said, tonight's topic is escaping the castle. I'm not gonna lie to you folks, it's a bullshit topic. We really just picked something random to talk about. We just got back from D&D in the castle. We've had Gen Con, or at least I've had Gen Con, and yeah, and maybe we'll talk about escaping castles or something. But right now, we'd actually like to be recaptured by the castle and put back.
Yeah, real life. It always is something that is a drastic change. D&D in a castle is a whirlwind adventure that literally, you're there for like 3.5 days, 4 days, and then just like a teleport, it's
Yeah.
done, it's over. And regardless of whether it's a, 8 hour car ride or an 8 hour plane ride, you're thrust back into real life and away from the, amazing food, amazing people, great stories, all of these things that go on. And I'm like, can I go back?
So this was our first castle here in the states because they just started running them this year, and I'm not gonna lie, it's not an actual castle, but it was kind of cool. Like if I had to describe the site, to me, it is a high end luxury campground, right? That's been kind of like retrofitted to look, kind of fantasy ish. Not even medieval, right? It's more like fantasy. Like there's a bunch of towers and cool stuff and structures. Um, but I don't want to undersell it by sell it by saying it's just a campground because they're luxury rooms. Like they are really nice. Um, a bunch of them have hot tubs in them. The ones that don't have hot tubs have regular tubs that are extra deep with jets in them, which is kind of cool. And like, there's a bunch of stuff going on there. From what I hear anyway, I didn't get to really experience much of that because I was running hardcore mode, which basically meant I was either running D&D, eating, pooping, or writing material. Sometimes all three at the same time. Whatever it took to get it done. Right. So I didn't really have as much time to enjoy the other amenities of the location, which Ted could probably go into much more than I did. But like we could talk about the fun gaming stuff that went on for sure, and just getting the game with people you haven't gamed with before.
And that's one of the things that I adore about D&D in a castle. It is always a gamble. It's a crapshoot. You never know who is coming to your table. Now, you were fortunate enough that you had your table filled early enough because you were running hardcore mode that you had a couple of Zoom calls with your players ahead of time to kind of pre-game and start your session zeros and really start getting down into the nuts and bolts of it all. I didn't have my table filled up until like 2 weeks before the castle. And at that point in time, like it was a whirlwind of life activities and, getting ready for the castle that there wasn't time to really get everyone together and try and schedule, hey, can we go over a couple of things? So I didn't really get to meet them until we got to the castle. And it was like, oh, it's 7 o'clock. We're gaming in 14 hours. So I had a lot of okay, let's start tying some things together as we're playing.
You're an awesome DM. They're not a big deal, right?
Right.
So we can talk about this from several different angles, right? We can just talk about our experience at the tables we ran. If you have questions about like running and preparing for these style of events, like even like mini campaigns, that kind of stuff. We can kind of give you tips and tricks that we've used, that maybe will be helpful for you. I've seen some people where they run like multi-day events at conventions as a convention game and like have them like loosely interconnected, but you can jump in and jump out at any point, and it doesn't kill anything, right? So even like that can be kind of useful. So I ran the hardcore mode with, of Valhalla Awaits, and my game started off with my players all being dead. And they meet upon the road and they encounter Odin in one of his guises, in this case the Wanderer, and like he kind of forces like this shared vision upon the group of how they each met their end, and then kind of offers them another way, something better, another chance at redemption, where he then leads them to the All Father's Hall, and like he kind of like hands them over to the Norse gods and vanishes. And then of course he's sitting on the throne when they open the doors, even though he was just next a moment ago. But I guess that's one of the perks of being the king of gods. Uh, so my table, was a lot of fun. I had a lot of great players. I had a lot of players that came to play, and that is like super. That's like the cool thing about these events. For some reason, like it really does cut down on your chances of getting an ass hat at your table. I don't know if it's the nature of the event or whatever. I've only had one experience that was questionable, that was handled at the table and kind of worked out in all the tables that I've ran at D&D in a castle. Um, but it's like we had people from all over the country, different walks of life. One of my players, Hardcore Henry, is what we called him, because he literally for it was foregoing he was literally foregoing dialysis to come play D&D. And like I believe the castle was trying to downsell him. Whenever you heard of people doing that, they're like, well, maybe if you got this medical stuff going on, maybe you should do like the lesser version, so that like he has some recovery. But he was a trooper, and like he hung in the whole time, and had really didn't have any problems at all. And he was also ended up being like one of the wild cards at my table. So shout out to that guy, but everybody was a lot of fun. Um, and I feel like at these kind of events, like that's what you get. You get like, cool people that come to play the game. And of course I had at least one forever DM at my table. Any forever DMs at your tables?
We didn't really get into that aspect of it. We talked about like how long people have been playing. Nobody gave me like nobody gave me the feeling that like, all right, I'm here because I want to play.
This is the only way I'm going to ever get to play as a player. Yeah.
Now I did have a handful of influencers at my table, so like to me there was a little bit of pressure going on of like, all right, if I screw this up, like I'm gonna get
that,
roasted on
that gets
somebody's
canceled
TikTok.
on TikTok forever. The
So
Zennials and the Alphas come out for you, man. Like, roll initiative.
so as I've talked about here on previous iterations, I was going to run, or I ran a lycanthrope game, and it was supposed to start off, or I mean it started off with a battle of them declaring war on Clawhaven because they view things differently, and they're tired of the world thinking that lycanthropy is a curse and a bad thing, that they're gonna kill everybody or turn them into a lycanthrope. That's the only choices. And obviously that sounds really bad. So it was a lot of fun. And as things began to mold and grow as the battle started, it's like, okay, this is an opportunity. So I wound up trying to put combats in that were like not just straightforward fights every time. It's like, how can I do things to go this way or to go that way? So the first fight wound up not just them trying to kill everyone, but being like a ransack. And it was uh, designed to test the players and see how much they're paying attention. So as they're taking supplies, it's like, well, why would they be needing supplies? What's going on? So with some roles, they found out, okay, well, clearly there are more lycanthropes here. Uh, once you count the townsfolk and the people attacking, and if they're getting food, maybe there's more lycanthropes. Maybe this bad guy is turning a whole bunch of people to send against them later, and that this is only the first wave. So it got them really thinking and start prepping for what may come later.
So, what advice do you give to someone who wants to run like they're not short arcs, but like 24-hour arc is fairly decent.
So if you have the time to prep ahead, you want to prep options. You want to always be able to give your players agency and choice so that they can go and do the things that the characters feel is necessary. If you don't want to run, oh well, here's a railroad adventure. Nothing's wrong with that. But if you don't want to run that style game, then you've got to prep more things than the players are going to actually do. Even if it's just like, all right, starts of ideas. And okay, well, after the session, I got a couple hours. Let's figure out exactly what does this mean. Let's dive in and put some encounters together. Um, so like that was kind of what I did. So first session, they have this fight, their leader gets taken, and it's like, all right, well, we're outmatched right now. So we need to do something. So you can go talk to this guy, or you can go recruit from here, you can go recruit from there, and see where we might be able to gather help. And after that, it was just allowing the players the choice of, well, where do you feel like going? Who do you want to talk to? What do you want to do? How do you want to gain more power, for the town? And all the options they did, were things that I had inklings of ideas, threads of where the story and adventure would go. But then, things are always so much improv that I was like, all right, well, I got to start now. Where does this go? So once they gave me the direction they were talking about going, and I had time to prep a little bit, I would put together some more pieces and have that ready for the next time we sat together. So options, options, options. Have more than you can possibly use.
Yeah, so I ended up having to go the other direction and do something I fairly rarely ever do, and that was like over prepare. Just because like I'm like, all right, I'm not gonna have a lot of downtime
Yep.
to make this stuff happen, so I just need to have as much written as possible. Um, so I came with a PDF that was like I'm gonna say it was like 20. I don't know if it was 28 or 38 pages.
I remember writing like 31, so I'm pretty sure it was must have been 38.
Yeah, I don't know if goes up or down after it gets like laid out. To be honest with you, but in addition to that, um, I ended up with uh Google Doc with another Google document with 28 pages, and very little of it was like in-game notes as we are playing. It was all like more like prep notes than anything
Yep.
else.
So we could literally take that second doc and format it and get part two and put that up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it was a lot of fun. Like some of the things were just things that I thought of, and then other things were just things that like the players mentioned. Like I hadn't planned a trip for them to go find the Norns, but they
Mhm.
did. And they're like, we want to know more information about this thing, right? And it was cool because like I was able to take their visit and journey to the quest to go to the Norns to find out like what they wanted to know was like so the whole thing was like they had to get accepted by the gods and become a champion of the gods and as I'll get back to you, Zargon. And as they did, right, as they earned the trust of a particular deity, um, and became that deity's champion, they became more and more powerful, from that deity. And it was kind of curious to see like who they chose and why. Like some of them are just like straight up, I'm a sorcerer. I need that +2 to charisma, and I need my max charisma to go up. So yeah, it's going to be Barter, and which is funny too because like they're like some of them came in knowing a little bit about Norse mythology, and some knew nothing at all. Like the one that shows Balder, I'm like, oh, you're in for a bad time later. Um, but and then other people were like, made choices that were like more um more related, both mechanically but story wise. And some people went like just completely story wise, like the barbarian that chose Frigg. Matter of fact, it was a Path of the Giant. Is that what it's called?
Mhm.
Um, chose Frigg, right? Which Frigg is like wisdom and insight and the community and marriage and very much things you would not think of when you think of a barbarian warrior.
Right.
So,
But
so, so that
if
was
he's
kind of
got
cool.
cool, if you when you got cool story reasons to do those things, it's like, all right, well, that's pretty darn awesome.
Yeah, and that was just that he want the character wanted more insight into the world as a whole, and felt that like that deity could help him grow in that direction. So like so again, like that was an encounter that I did end up writing up, but only after I knew that like, oh, this is where they're going. That was one of my late nights up to like 1:30, just hammering away on the keys, like making sure I had at least 36 hours of material for people to play through. That was stressful, like having D&D with such a tight deadline. And I feel
Yeah.
like like one of the jokes that was made, like some of the like DMs will run like way more um material than they're actually required to.
Hmm.
That's just that they over deliver. But like then someone else was teasing them because like their regular game was like X amount of hours and it was like way over, but they're like their hardcore mode you could have set a watch to, right?
Right.
But I was like, no, that actually makes a lot of sense to me because like you're so worried about making sure you have enough that you're not really going to want to stretch it or run over a lot. Plus, you're just doing really long days anyway, as it is, and so like when you're just doing the extra because you want to, there's like no pressure there. But when you're like, oh, I got to get this amount in to make sure I provide for everybody. So so like so to me that kind of made sense. So Zargon had a couple questions.
All right. Let's go for it.
All right, at you, man. What was the wildest were creature you had? Were goose? Were chipmunk? Were chimpanzee?
So nobody tried to go off book. So I had a were vulture, a were raven, a were bat. Then we had a were boar, a were fox, and a were rat. So no one went wolf, no one went bear. So it was pretty fun. Now I
No were
I
lobsters.
no were lobsters or were crabs. I was hoping that somebody would be like, "Hey, can I do something a little different?" And you know, pitch me on something. And I would have been totally fine with it.
Yeah.
It's not like you were getting powers based on your animal. It
Yeah.
was just I picked two stats that would be associated with the animal.
I mean, it's a
And I
little late
sort of
now, but what might have been cool would have been go back to third edition
uh-huh.
and look at because I'm pretty sure there's a were creature for all, and just look what their feature was, and like
Uh-huh.
give them the feature, right? Like I
Sure.
like werebore I think had something to do with charging or ferocious
Hmm.
or something of that nature. Um, I don't know. Although it would like give them a lot of control, combat
Hmm.
control. But again,
Sure.
like technically, if they're fighting other were creatures, you could do the same to them.
do those things too. All right, so that's an idea. I really liked how this thing flowed. So I might do this one again. That's an anomaly for me when it
Yeah.
comes to D&D Castle. Um, but I might do it.
Yeah. Well, so I have another idea for hardcore mode, but also it would be nice to be like, this is already freaking written. Uh,
And they've already accepted it once, so you can always submit it again.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So Zargon, I'm riveted at hearing about you being out of your warehouse by prepping so extensively. Yeah, so what I ended up doing is one, me and Ted had actually written like so going into this, like I had some ideas and I had a really rough outline. And then we were contracted by Cobalt Press to be part of their Tales of the Valiant Kickstarter where they did like a bunch of an adventure pack and so I pitched Ted selfishly. I might mind you is that if we're going to do this, why don't we do this thing that has to be done anyway? You know, and I don't have any other ideas right now. And Ted was like, "Sure, we can do that." So like basically the first part of my adventure, me and Ted had already wrote, and to be honest with you, Ted had did most of the writing on that project to begin with, just the way schedules had worked out. Um, so I had that going into it, and like I said, that was, however many words that document was.
It's a
Uh,
lot.
yeah, yeah, or not words, but how many pages that was. I'll pull it up because it was 39, right? And then that was 39, and then I just went to town writing beyond that. So the key thing for me to do was, one, we had already worked on that, and like Ted did the bulk of the writing, but I kind of outlined like here's the idea for the flow of the adventure, and then he filled in the details. So I took that and I kind of guesstimated how long it would take for how many hours of adventure this was. And from that, I then went and I said, okay, well, I have to run 9 sessions at D&D in a castle. So I broke it down to every session and looked at the adventure and said, okay, where is this going to take me to? What do I still need? There were definitely some gray areas where it could have definitely used a lot more filling in. Whereas things like Ragnarok Part One, Ragnarok Part Two, and then like then I had to figure out what that was going to be. I think the adventure itself took me to the adventure itself took me to session 5 with adding in like some travel that wasn't necessarily there. So so basically the adventure itself was good for about 4 sessions. Which is basically a day and a third. But I still had a day and 2/3 to figure out. One of those things that I figured out was, all right, well, the midway point on the adventure itself, there's a space for travel that isn't really addressed in the adventure. It's kind of hand waved. So I was like, well, if we address it there, that gives me another day, taking me to 5. I know the Ragnarok event itself is going to be a big deal, so I blocked out 2 sessions for that, basically. Um, so the way that I figure out what I need when I'm running adventures that have to have a certain time you start and a certain time you end is my general rule of thumb. Your mileage may vary. Is 1 encounter per hour. Now, that's not one combat encounter per hour. That's just something happens once per hour for your players to engage with and interact with. Now, it can be some of that can be combat, but if you do 4 combats, it's going to probably take you more than 4 hours. It's D&D after all, especially the higher level you get. Um, but if you add exploration and social encounters in there as well, then where combat kind of hogs more of the time, those other things can sometimes um make up for it. So I feel like that's a really good barometer. when you're on a time limit and you're trying to figure out how much material to prep. And again, like what you can do if you feel if you're not confident is you can prep a couple extra encounters. Again, they don't all have to be combat. You know, it could be social exploration, and have them where they can just be slotted in, so that when when you're like gauging, like if you're at a convention running and you're like, shit, I'm halfway through and most of my material is done. You know, you can go, okay, what do I have in my back pocket? Well, I've got this other stuff for the players to interact with, and take the story in some different directions and pad it out a little bit. So that, I mean, that's my like basic go to. I'm thinking of you know how I'm going to design and run for a set amount of time. And so far it's been fairly consistent and has worked out pretty well. Last time I did D&D in a castle, I kind of used like a 3 act a 3 act structure, which also works for this. It can work for like what we did this time as well, just because it's 3 days. But even then, when I specifically used a 3 act structure, I broke each act in half. Right? So
Hmm.
yeah, so I ended
And
up with what do we usually run, 6 sessions?
six
So
sessions, 4 hour blocks.
12 parts, right? Is like kind of how I did it previously, and that also works out, right? Because that's where you're going to insert your story beats, right? Like, and it's not just about adding encounters and filling time, filling space. I know the way I said it might have made it sound like that a little bit, but you want to have your primary encounters match your primary story beats, right? And that's why when we say encounter, it doesn't just mean combat encounter. Now, those extra encounters you prep just in case, you're going to want them to tie them to some of the other story beats that you have going on, and you have to do it in a way that's going to keep the players focused on their objective and not distract them. So they have to be easily inserted, but also they have to be able to still funnel the players in the direction you want them to go.
And that sometimes is going to be the tricky part, and especially when you're talking about whether it's convention games or something like D&D in a castle where you don't know the players and their style necessarily. It can be tough to be like, okay, well, if I put something in front of you, how are you gonna respond to that? So I always look at that as, again, I need to have options of what am I going to do when the players decide that they're going to do something that I hadn't expected.
Yeah,
Uh,
and when you run these style games, like you really need player buy-in. Like you need players that came here to play the game that you're running, not ones that want to fuck off and do whatever it is they think they want to do, because it's just not a good setting for it. It's not, sandboxes are great for your home games, but they're not great when you're playing, at D&D in a castle. You're playing at a convention, right? You got like you got so much time between when this table's getting used for you and your group and the next group, right? So you got to go in, do the thing, and then get out. So if your players decide, yeah, we could go do that adventure you wrote for this specific thing, or we can have a shopping session. Yeah, that's not going to work. And as a player, you're kind of being a dick. That's just not the time and
so
place for it.
so that was literally like, it was put in the premise of my game, when we talked in the tavern, D&D in the castles, little meeting app, whatever you want to refer to it as, but also I reiterated during session 0, it's like, all right, you guys are decidedly on, the town side, right? I clarified right then and there, like, okay, what are you going to do if somebody tries to persuade you? Like, are you on the fence? Are you decidedly one way? Because I didn't want to all of a sudden be like, let's have to rewrite material because now they've joined with the bad guy and what have you. So I wanted to make sure that they were not there for wholesale slaughter. And thankfully they were all like, nope. thumbs up. We're here for the story you got. Because this was far more open ended than other adventures that I had run, previously. I mean, heck, I even ran my second time out. I ran a modified, haunted house game, that I had done, you know, previously, like not whole cloth, but like I extended the single one shot haunted house into okay, let's turn this into 6 sessions and see what this looks like. And they all had a blast with it.
So, any major takeaways from your game?
Um, I had an absolute blast. I miss all the players. I thought they role played phenomenally. We had emotional moments, things that were stuff that I created, as well as things that were created solely player based without any uh, pre collaboration. So I had everybody say, what do you do in the town? I want you to have a life here so that the fact that it is threatened, it means something. So the one dude was entirely like, I'm a wizard. I study books. My character's a nerd. I'm going to go over here. This one character wound up being, essentially like the waitress, at the tavern. And, she was always talking about this and talking about that. Well, the wizard decided to have an alternate personality when he went into his lycanthrope form. So when the were rat came out, he was literally a party animal, and had a different voice, had a whole different personality. So like it got defined as like he's literally got two souls in one body. Somehow when he changed, something happened. So it turns out nobody knew where Lizard Lips went during the day, the were rat. But at nighttime,
That
he would
name
come out
gets me
and party in
every
the tavern.
time.
So when he changed and turned into Lizard Lips, like he knew, the waitress, the bartender, like, oh my god, so like they both were like celebrating, like right there as this happened. And again, no communication, but they just accepted, well, this is now canon. And it was absolutely amazing. And it brought about many historical laughters thereafter, because it was just like, all right, Lizard Lips is just funny.
It is very funny. So, for me, one of the interesting things was like the characters came up with vastly different um character types. Like
Sure.
like I had one that had forsaken the gods and now is seeking the gods. I had another one that one of their failings in life was they trusted strangers that then betrayed their tribe, right? And so like the first thing they do is trust strangers again, right? Um, which I found to be an interesting choice, but also that was the same player that chose to be a champion of Frigg and wanted deeper insight.
Right.
Um, and then I had a player that was her character just started out kind of shitty, so
Wow.
and from like kind of a dark place where everyone was a little bit on the shitty side, and like which it was cool again, like all three of those characters had a lot of character, right?
Sure.
um you know hardcore Henry's character was a little bit more locked in stasis, like he was the consummate soldier from the
Sure.
beginning to beginning to the end. um and then Justin's character he was playing a dragonborn that was actually created through experimentation. And and in the end, like he really wanted to and he started off just wanting power and like kind of reveling in chaos, but by the end of the game his character was more looking for stability and living in the moment, experiencing life. where the shitty character actually became like the biggest team player amongst the group and wanted to really be the glue that binds the group together, and really started trusting others. The cat, the character that started off, having forsaken the gods, came back around after meeting them, and their big takeaway was, oh, the gods aren't malicious or malevolent; they're just flawed like us. Uh,
Right.
which kind of like repaired that relationship, and so, I love the fact that Rod's character, the barbarian, that ended up in a bad spot because he trusted the wrong people, never gave up and gave up on trusting strangers and the inherent goodness of people as a whole. uh so like to watch all those characters grow was really interesting. Sadly for hardcore Henry, um he produced the most what the fuck moment at the game. Like part of like their deal was with Odin was, Odin just didn't want to die in Ragnarok more than anything. So they came up with a way to recapture the Fenris wolf, so Odin would survive and hopefully break the cycle of Ragnarok. Well, just as the gods were about to complete the binding on Fenrir, uh, he heals Fenrir, because like part of the goal was to get him down to the bloodied mark so that they could bind him. But they'd already partially bound him, and he had the chains wrapped around his muzzle. So when he leapt at Odin, he wasn't actually in a position to really hurt Odin, but Odin was ready because he was the one kind of directing the magics and away from the fray. So he was able to defeat Fenrir, but because Henry decided he was going to betray Odin, he did catch Gungnir to the chest several times before being turned into an ant, by touching Odin's spear, and then Sleipnir leapt upon the ant, crushing it. Which, like, one of the things was because the characters all kind of started off dead, they kept hearing like throughout the adventure, "Oh, you guys were mortal, but you're not anymore. Don't die. That's going to be really bad." And it wasn't until like very close to the end of the adventure, that someone finally told them why it was bad. It's like, because you'll be obliterated out of existence, and everyone will forget you. It'll be as if you never were. Uh, but they left out the part where they didn't know that the persons would be sent to their own special hell, which Hardcore Henry was. Which Odin then went to that hell, ripped him from it, and then pinned him to the world tree with his spear to let him think about what he's done. Which, I mean, there are also a lot of personal moments that happened within the adventures, and Henry had a couple had a couple good ones, from his backstory. But he is the only one did not become a demigod of the group, because he betrayed Odin. But who knows where his story will go from there.
Yeah, we had one player who decided to like put up, okay, I work in the tavern, and like the owner hates me, and it's always a contentious relationship. And I always love turning those kind of things on the player's heels, so that is like the surprise turnaround. So once the town has been attacked and they're all doing their, okay, well, we're going to go off and try and do things to try and save this town. So he basically was like, all right, I'm going to go quit my job and, tell her that I'm probably going to go off and die and not come back. So this innkeeper who's had this contentious relationship, like all of a sudden was like hugging her and like, don't go, like you've been a daughter to me. And now it was like super emotional change. uh and she was pushing her to be better, so it was viewed as contentious, but it was trying to like be uplifting, and it just wasn't coming across that way. So then, so the character's name was Solara, and the inn was called the Rusty Bucket, named by a player. So when they came back to town at in session 6, she sees the sign has been changed outside the tavern and now says Solaris Swill. So like as a second emotional thing of like, all right, well, you know, now like the tavern has totally been renamed after this character, which has its own connotations, and is like, well, you know, is the innkeeper alive? I don't see her. So like, while the fight is going on, there's this moment of like, all right, where is she? What's going on? Is she alive? So it was a lot of fun to kind of like play with the emotions. When you create these characters, it's a lot of fun to kind of pull at the heartstrings.
Well, it shows when your players get emotional, it shows they're invested in the story and what's going on. So as a DM, that's a good feeling. Uh,
Absolutely.
and also too, like for me, like seeing what they do with what I present to them and how they handle the challenges, as well as to watch their characters grow, is awesome. Because also, like in one of my session zeros, one of the players was like, I want to see the characters have like good arcs. And like the best part about that was I didn't really have to do anything, right? It just happened naturally, by presenting um different circumstances for the players to interact with characters, and it just naturally happens so much. One of the other crazy thing happened during my game was they had to work their way through a labyrinth, and then at the end of the labyrinth there's a frost giant jarl who they have to face that jarl in a challenge. Um, and it's a flighting competition. Which, if you're not familiar with the term flighting, is a Norse word, Old Norse word that basically is an insult challenge, right? So it's a rap battle from from the time of the Norse, and so but before this happens, there's this party going on, and and it's set up in a way that they can interact with all the different giants that are there. They're the only small folk there. They're the only mortals, and you know, and they're trying to find out more information and dig up information, uh, on the giant that they have to face. And so the sorcerer does some shenanigans, and they cast a spell. Well, they're playing a wild magic sorcerer, and the way that I do wild magic in my games, if you use Tides of Chaos, the very next it automatically resets, and the very next time you go to cast a leveled spell, you just roll. And so they're trying to gather information and kind of be discreet. So they roll on the wild magic table, and they roll. You will have a wild magic surge every round for the next minute, and shenanigans ensue. So, Ted, there's calls in the chat for you to write up your adventure for them.
Oh, well, I mean, I've got a lot of
Sign up for
what's
D&D in the
there.
castle. Ted's more than happy to run it for you.
Well, there is that too. You just got to make sure you let them know, that you want Ted to come back. Wow.
Yeah, so I
Uh,
would say
that-
that was the wildest, and also the fact that only the last roll was one that was like that. There's no getting around this one. Uh, was amazing in and of itself. Now I don't know. No, I don't even think he was high enough to choose yet. But I was waiting for the fireball underneath the Jarl's table, which
that
would
would have
have
definitely been bad.
it would have been bad because one of the things about it is if you bring violence to the celebration, then you kind of get kicked out and you can't complete it.
Which would be bad.
Yeah, which would be bad. Yeah, unfortunately, that competition was like very last minute. So that was tough. Um, next time if they decide to do that, hopefully it'll be with more advanced notice, so we can really get it out there and promote it more. They did draw some winners, but I don't even know if a winner showed up. So that is above my pay grade.
Yeah, it was them running
Contest.
the thing, not us. I know you were down a player. I had a full table. Uh, One of my players was somebody who won at Gen Con, which
Yeah.
was awesome. And they had
So
told me it was one of the best games they've ever played, if not the best.
one of
So
so the player that so I had a full table. I just didn't have all the people there. Um, so apparently, like the person had taken off a bunch of time for Gen Con, for the castle, and some other things, but then also had gotten COVID at Gen Con, so that put them out of work even longer. And a matter of fact, they got it like in the middle of Gen Con too, so it wasn't even like they ended up leaving early, I think. And so like their boss was like, "Yo, man, um, it's just you. I can't give you all this. You got to actually come to work." So unfortunately, but made it work.
do what you got to do sometimes.
You do what you got to do sometimes. So we got to have a cool road trip out there.
Yep,
8 hours each way.
indeed.
So you had to really like the people you're in the car with.
Well, thankfully, that's not a problem for me. But realistically, like I look at it, like it was an 8 hour flight to England or an 8 hour
Yeah.
car ride. And for me, I can either go to England and have two suitcases worth of something, or I can go to Ohio and have my entire car full of, gaming resources. I'll take I'll take the drive to Ohio instead. I honestly feel like once you take into account sitting in the airport, waiting for things to go on, airport pricing for, food and drinks and what have you. Um, yeah, I'll take the trip to Mohican.
Well, the trip
Uh,
isn't bad, but being in a castle in the UK is pretty nice too.
uh, I mean, I'll go back to wherever they want me because it's
Yeah.
an awesome experience regardless of wherever. Um, but if you gave me the choice of, Lumley or Mohican, I'm gonna choose Mohican.
Interesting. Interesting.
I've been to Lumley 3 times. I've been to Mohican once. The jacuzzi tubs, having access to a pool. Um, you know, while Lumley is great and all, it's very creaky floors and lots of stairs. And while Mohican's got its hills, I think that's it's overall, that's the winner for me. If you give me another castle option over in Europe,
Yeah.
sure.
Well, I will say too, for it's for someone that's considering doing this as a vacation, and you got to look at it as a vacation. You can't look at it as just going to play D&D because like there's hands down like there's not even a choice. It's a hard no if you're just talking about D&D. But if you look at it as like your vacation budget, and I'm going to go
Yep.
on vacation, and this is what I'm going to do with my vacation, then it's a sweet trip. And the nice thing about the Mohican Castle is the fact that it is going to be a lot less expensive for most people in the states to go to Ohio than getting over to overseas and going to the castle. Now, I know some people, actually a lot of people, what they've done, like when they've done Lumley, is they extend their stay out there and kind of like do two vacations together, right? Like
Right.
they do the 4 days in the castle, and then they'll do a little bit more before or after, and to maximize the fact that you just flew across the ocean to get there. So
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to do a huge amount of exploring out in England. As the castle staff has taken us to here or there, I've seen some cool places and some things. I know you've gotten out to go see, Frankie's tattoo shop, so you got to see a little bit
Yeah,
elsewhere besides
we went
that.
in the Durham too, but we both went in the Durham. Like the first time we went in the
Yes.
Durham. Um, and that was kind of cool. You guys were playing Betrayer, right? In one of the pubs.
Yep. I mean, it's
Mm.
a fabulous game. I'll play that just about anywhere.
Yeah,
Um, but there's a little bit of exploring. I've seen some things, but I mean, it's not like I've gotten, the full run of England or, seen anything else. You've been to Langley, you've been to the castle in France, so you've gotten to see a little bit more than I have.
yeah, yeah. I think I would pick Lumley just because Mohican doesn't have Frankie.
Sure, Frankie is awesome, but I enjoyed the fact that Mohican had, uh, for lack of a better word, table service. You could literally be like, "Hey, can somebody bring me XYZ?" And somebody would show up from hotel staff with it, and you could just get it charged to your room. So if you wanted drinks or you wanted something to eat,
Yeah.
there were options. Now I'm told that they're trying to get Lumley to do that kind of stuff. Um,
They probably
but
will, but just because they rent out the whole castle, like that's not a really. I don't think that's a big ask,
um,
considering.
the Lumley is UK based, and while the last time we were there, the food was improved. I would say generally the because it's US based, we had a much more wide array of food options that were uh, tasty. Um,
Yeah,
I only had
colonize
one.
colonize half of the goddamn world, and you can't figure out how to use any of the spices you conquered it for. Come on.
There's only one meal that I'm like, all right, well, I'm just gonna eat enough to satiate my hunger and move on. Um,
Who told the story? Maybe it was B. Dave that told the story, or somebody else said that the UK used to have a lot of spices and flavor in their food,
uh-huh,
but one king decided he only liked, I don't know, let's say pepper or salt. And
uh-huh.
so he ruined it for the whole country. After that, no
Yes,
one they all stopped using all the spices.
correct.
That prick.
That is,
Yeah.
so
Oh, it just takes
all in all,
one fool to mess it up for everybody.
there you go. So all in all, we have our choices. I'll go to either location. I'll go to a new location. It's always a great time. The castle staff are or the D&D and the castle staff are absolutely fabulous. Um, Joe and Buffy and everybody else that was part of the Mohican staff were incredibly friendly. They were, always asking like, well, what else can we do? And, whenever there was a problem, they were always like right on top of it to, try and get anything they could done, fixed, what have you. Um, so thanks to
Well, actually, that is
the
kind of
castle.
funny because when I was introduced to Joe,
Mm-hmm.
he introduced himself as a GM Joe.
Uh-huh.
And I just looked at him like, no, no, you're not. I was like, oh, you mean general manager? Because I haven't seen you in any of the promo stuff. You're not a dungeon master. Also, he looked like he's 12. So,
He was not 12. He was in his 20s, probably.
yeah, yeah.
Young guy.
He was great. They were all really good there. It was a good time. So prior to that, I actually did Gen Con, um, which was fun. I ran some games for D&D and Castle there. They went over really well. And let's see, I got to play Shadow Dark with the creator, so that was cool. She didn't run the game. I think Baron Durop from I think it's Dungeon Master Peter might be the name of his YouTube channel. Um, but he actually ran the game for like nine of us, seven of us, something like that, a decent amount of people. It was a lot of fun. Like it's like most other OSR D&D games. I mean, from one session, it's hard to get a lot of it, but out of it, as far as like the full breadth and depth of the game. but the only real differences is in Shadow Dark. There's a couple things. One, a torch is last and torching a torch in game stops working an hour of actual gameplay time, but Baron was doing some different things where he would use random numbers, so they didn't last quite as long. And also, um, no race in Shadow Dark has dark vision. Nobody can see in the dark. Now mechanically, I think something is like supposed to happen when the lights go out if there's no light source, like something bad. And also, it's a roll to cast system, so you don't have spell slots or a set number of spells you can cast. You just have to roll every time you try to cast a spell. There's no guarantee that you get to cast it or not.
I like that.
Yeah, it's definitely different. Yeah, and the spells are kind of different. Like it's OSR, so it's like it's not as mechanical or as crunchy. But from what I did see, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to play.
Awesome. Uh, so we're down to our last few minutes. If there are any questions, you can always throw those up in the in the chat. I know we've filled in a handful already this evening. Uh, any last takeaways from Gen Con that you haven't had a chance to share?
So Gen Con, this time was like a lot less rushing around and stressful. Like I made it through like the floor almost in a single day, which I barely ever do. It usually takes me all 4 days to kind of mosey my way through. I did, of course, like forget one of the boxes I needed for my games. So there's that, and I had to like rush around and figure that out. I don't know. I got a tattoo when I was at Gen Con for my birthday. So it's an owlbear. I don't know how well you can see it on here. Maybe I'll post a picture on the YouTube community tab. What's the status on Zoo Mafia? So we are currently working on the redesign for Zoo Mafia. Not the game mechanics for stuff, just the look. Like we feel like it's a cool iconic game, but we don't feel like it has a cool iconic look yet. And so that's what we're working on. We're going to be working with Brian Colin from Vast Grim and Daryl T. Jones from Splattered Inc. Matter of fact, I'm going to run a game for them next week so they can get a feel for the game, and we're going to kind of take it from there. So those guys are going to kind of tag team it and look at the art and try and help us come up with a new look for it, freshen it up a little bit. We have been playing with mechanics a little bit, but for the most part, they're going to be the same. So we're really hoping um, to get it on Kickstarter again before this year ends. Probably um, you know closer to October ish. We have to figure out like the boring parts of like how many followers do you have to make this worth launching, kind of thing. And also like there's some other things like we want to do special with the Kickstarter we still have to figure out too. That's kind of where we're at with that. We've not given up yet. We're still working on it. What are the plans going forward for the channel? That's an excellent question. Me and Ted we're both sitting on these 2024 player handbooks that I don't know about Ted, but I have not even cracked the spine. I've been listening to some other YouTubers talk about it a little bit, and I don't even know if we're going to cover it at all. To be honest with you, we have not made um, produced content in quite some time. Most of you are probably aware of that. We we're not done. We're just taking a breath, right? We want to figure out where we're going, what we're doing, what we want to talk about. We have a couple games in mind that we want to make. Zoo Mafia being the next one. We'll probably always play D&D. Right now I'm a little burned out on YouTube when it comes to the dungeon tubers, or I think is the term that's currently being used. Ted pays a lot less attention to that stuff than I do, but it's like there's so much outrage porn that I'm just like we're just not interested in that. Like I remember the things we were called clickbaity for, and now I see the things like the titles of all the videos now for all the YouTube stuff, and I'm just like, ugh, I do not want to do any of that content. A lot of these content creators are making content we did 10 years ago, and I'm not necessarily sure we want to go back and rehash the same stuff over again. And please don't take this as a slight against them. A lot of them I follow, and a lot of them, and I think they're great. Like, but it's just like the progression of when you do this thing, right? Where you start off and kind of where you end up. And now we're trying to figure after 10 years of going, okay, where do we want to go with it? What do we want to do? What would be fun and interesting for us? Like, and that's kind of where we're at. And also, Nerdark, a little behind the scenes is like Nerdarchy's production values actually have gone past what we can produce now. So that's another hard thing that we're struggling with and trying to figure out how we want to combat that and how do we want to approach that to also deliver a good product for you guys to take in. Because for the longest time we just outsourced our editing, and that was just a problem that we didn't have to worry about. We didn't have to learn how to edit three cameras at once. You didn't have to worry about if we tried editing a three camera shoot at once, would our computers just melt into slag? Like, yeah. So yeah. So
So
like,
we
yeah,
got some workshopping to do. We got some
yeah.
things that are gonna happen. We're gonna keep doing our live stuff as we ponder and reflect and what have you. But it's gonna happen, and it's gonna happen at some point in time. I just don't know exactly when. As Dave says, he's gonna be running a Zoo Mafia game offline next week, so that means we will not be having our weekly Tuesday game, but we will be back tomorrow.
We'll be back tomorrow, and we'll be back next Monday too. Well, Monday's the holiday, so we haven't decided if we're going to do the holiday or not. A lot of times we do take the holidays off, but we've also had a lot of time off. So, well, just keep your eyes peeled, and we'll make that decision as it comes. But anyway, thanks everyone for hanging out with us. We really do appreciate you guys. And until next time, stay nerdy.
Stay nerdy.